Hello and welcome to another episode of Movies That Make Us. I'm Jake.
I'm Tracy.
Hi, and I'm Robert, not Val. Val couldn't be here today, so I am going to be sitting in for her. Hopefully I can do her proud.
Oh, I have no doubt.
Yeah, we're glad to have you, Robert. I think you'll do just fine. I'm not worried about it at all.
That's challenge accepted. No, just kidding.
Val is currently hanging out with Timon and Pumbaa in the wild down in South Africa. So Dave's got a tattoo convention, and they're doing a little sightseeing, and we're super excited for both of them. But we're excited to have Robert.
Well, thank you.
We're very excited to have you here, Robert, and we're excited because you picked the movie for us. We said you're going to be guessing what would you like to talk about, and you picked Smokey and the Bandit. And
now, to be honest, it was a half joke when I picked this movie. However, I regret nothing.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you, when you said it, there were probably, I don't know, 10, 15 movies I would have thought you would say, and this was not even close to that list.
I am happy to have broken the mold. And if you ever let me pick a movie again, I will probably pick something a little closer to what you would expect. But this one was just one of those, what is the most outrageous movie? They're going to be like, there's no way we're going to do this. And they said yes.
Challenge accepted, man. We're like Drax. We're very literal.
Fair enough.
Well, when you said it, I thought, the truth is that's probably the perfect follow-up for The Fountain that we did last week. So
total palate cleanser.
All right. Well, there we go. Well, then I'm happy to have been at least of some use in getting something that could be like, no, not that.
Yeah, it's one of those that it was like, as soon as you said it, I'm like, oh my gosh, I haven't seen that movie in so long. So I was excited to go back and revisit that.
So I am a person of a certain age, and I am of an age when this movie came out, I saw it in the theater.
Okay.
3 times.
Wow.
Yeah, I actually got my father, my father took me to go see it, and then I'm like, I think a week or so later, a week or 2 later, was like, can we see it again? And then probably another week or 2 after that was like, can we see it again? And my father apparently has the patience of Job, because he's like, okay, and he sat with me through this movie all 3 times. But it's also become that movie that everybody has, that guilty pleasure movie that just kind of, it's like, you don't talk much about it, except for now. And, when you do, it's just kind of like, oh, yeah. So for a 6-year-old kid sitting in the movie theater shoveling popcorn into your face, this is kind of an ideal movie just for the action. You don't have to think a lot about plot. Although there are, as you get older, you kind of go, oh, well, that was a thing. And that's another thing. And but all in all,
it's like fast cars.
Yeah, it's fast cars and action, and we can get into all of that. But yeah, so that's why I chose it. So thank you for indulging me.
Absolutely.
No, it was a lot of fun to go back and watch this one, and it's interesting you say watching it as a 6-year-old. There was probably a lot in this movie that went over your head as a 6-year-old as you listen to some of the dialogue and the stuff that happens.
So much.
This is what I love about the 1970s, is because PG was like the Wild West as far as the rules go. It was anything from that was above a G up to that line that would be an R, because this would probably be a PG-13
easily.
Now.
Yeah.
So
I don't know that this movie could be made the same way today. And I would actually wonder, I mean, you could do a lot of the basics of it. We have the setup of, I'm challenging this person to do X.
Right.
And the cross-country aspect. But some of the social mores have changed over the past 50 years. So you're just kind of like, maybe we shouldn't do that.
There were quite a few moments where I said to my wife, they couldn't make this movie with that line today.
And if I remember correctly, this is the first movie that actually probably the first time I remember seeing somebody give the middle finger. And then getting a conversation after the movie of like, yeah, you don't do that.
Yeah, and it's Sally Field that gives the middle finger.
And I mean, Gidget. Who's going to expect Gidget to be like, oh,
Right?
Yeah.
that happened?
Whoa. Okay.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's so Sheriff Buford T. Justice, I think, gives us most of the problematic material in this movie that wouldn't work today, and I kind of I feel like it fits. I don't think anybody was saying that any of what he was saying or doing was socially acceptable. They were making fun of a certain type of person that was not a good person even back in the
Right.
70s,
Right.
even though he was the law. And by the
But this
way,
is all
if your
great, but
name
it's
is
an outsider
Buford T.
movie. I mean, Bandit was the ultimate outsider for,
Yeah,
fast cars, trucker, rebel in more than one sense.
yep. I was just gonna say if you name your kid Buford T. Justice, like he's gonna grow up and be a sheriff. Like, what kind of name is that anyway?
Well,
Uh,
and speaking of the sheriff, his catchphrase, son of a bitch,
Yeah.
Some
could not
bitch.
be
Some
could not
bitch.
some bitch could not be said on television. So in the 1980s, they would overdub it, and they came up with the phrase "scumbum."
Yes.
okay,
I
Scumbum.
remember this.
Scumbum, and it became so popular that in 2007, Hot Wheels released a 1970s Firebird Trans Am that has Scumbum emblazoned on its tail.
Awesome. That is awesome.
You scumbum!
I remember
So
when it was on TV and they would be scumbum. I'm like, okay.
Right,
And again, it didn't so much go over my head because it wasn't one of those things that stuck
right.
as far
right,
as
You just
in the movie in the theater versus on TV because I'm getting to watch the movie, so I'm just like, okay, that's fine.
right.
right.
But I remember catching it on cable a few years later, and it was like, oh, that wasn't. Oh, okay.
My favorite censor of all time is Snakes on a Plane.
Oh, I've had it with this I've had it with these
Monkey fighting
monkey
snake.
fighting snakes on this Monday to Friday
Monday
plane.
to Friday plane.
Yes.
Yes.
I
Hmm.
my heart goes out to whoever the editors were that had to figure out how to edit snakes on a plane for television.
Do we just beep? Is it like do you just beep the whole movie? I mean, at
Yeah.
that point.
Right? Yeah.
So
But yeah, it's, Smoking the Bandit. Like I said, it's one of those things where seeing it as a kid, it's just become one of those lifelong guilty pleasures.
Hmm.
I have a lot of, I guess, my formative movies were from the '70s, like my 10 being the '78 Superman. But
Yeah.
mhm.
but Smoking the Bandit is just check your brain at the door. Don't think too hard about it. Fun, and it's actually led to two funny things in my life. One, when we discovered that we were having twins, some friends of mine got us a couple of gift cards to a store, and they had teddy bears on them, and they labeled one Smokey and one Bandit. So, so that was one. Um, oh, shoot, I just forgot the other one because that one just superseded it. Because I just think that's adorable. And then now I cannot remember what the other thing was that was so endearing about that movie that had a later. Oh, sorry. So, Maker's Mark will do a thing where you can become an ambassador, and you can have your name put on one of their barrels of whiskey that's as
Mhm.
it's brewed, and then you can go to Kentucky and tap and draw from that barrel.
Okay.
So my wife is because my barrel comes up this year. And she's like, well, we could fly to Kentucky and then Smokey and the Bandit it back. And I'm just like, tell me more.
I love you. I
I
love you
love
so
you.
much.
So that may be a
Yep.
summer trip.
Well, yeah. I mean, you can't transport that back to Utah, right?
No,
No, the alcohol
Not
content.
no,
no. Mm-mm.
I can't.
Although
I
it
can't. I
was
can't bring 18 bottles of it back.
it was so weird to see them smuggling Coors. Like
Well,
I
I
had
Yeah.
mean,
forgotten that, and that
but
was just it's so ubiquitous now, you know?
but at the time, well, one of the things is Coors was pretty much a regional beer at that time,
Okay.
so it didn't have Wow, I am that old. It didn't have it didn't
I'm
have
right behind you, but I don't remember that.
the national coverage. So it was, it was one of these things like when you're going to challenge it. So for people who don't know the premise of the movie, this very wealthy man and his son, who basically treat life like we can bet on anything we want, and we have the money to back it up. Find a local truck driver who's kind of a legend slash notorious, take your pick, and challenge him to drive from Atlanta, Georgia, to Texarkana, Texas, pick up a truck full of Coors beer and drive it back to Atlanta in 48 hours.
Because
And
they're having a race and they want to celebrate in style.
exactly. So
Right.
having done part of that drive in moving here, it's like 48 hours. It's doable, but it's not fun. It wouldn't be fun
Mhm.
by any stretch of the imagination. And you've also at this point got to load the truck. You've got stops to make, etc. And it's Burt Reynolds as Bandit Darville, and
Hmm.
Jerry Reed as his best friend Cletus Snow, known as the Snowman, and they're a two-man truck driving team. So they're like, okay. Well, actually, Bandit's like, okay, and Cletus, when Bo tells him this, is kind of like, you are out of your cotton picking mind.
Yep.
Almost literally, you're out of your cotton picking mind. Like that's 48 hours. Just no way that one team could do this, and this is when Bandit's like, but I've got a plan. And you're just like, oh my, here we go. And, hijinks ensue.
I think one of my favorite moments is as they're talking about the plan, and Cletus brings up, well, they're listening on the CBs now. Smokey's always listening on the
Mhm.
CBs now. How are we going to get around that? He's like, well, I haven't really thought that one through. And so Cletus comes up with this plan that channel 21 is going to be channel 19 and channel 11 is going to be channel 9. Like, and it's not, there's no
It's
rhyme or reason
random.
in the numbers that he's
Three's gonna be
picking.
one.
And like, Bandit's kind of looking at him for a minute, like, yeah, or
They just start at
because it
one.
was just so overly complex.
And another reason this movie couldn't be made is cell phones. What are you
Yeah,
Mhm.
doing? Hey, I'm here. Let's go.
I remember like people being really into like ham radio or CB radio and things
God.
like that. And I'm thinking, was this the movie that like kicked off the craze with CB and ham radio? Because I mean, man, they were all over it. That's how they
Probably put
communicated.
gas on the fire.
Yeah.
It was interesting around that time because I remember that at that point, CBs were mostly a trucker thing, but oddly enough, I knew people then who got them in their cars. So it
Hmm.
was like, okay, and here we go.
Yeah.
And a lot of kids were just kind of like trying to learn the 10 codes so they know what it's like, how can I say where I am, or when I'm going to the bathroom, or I'm getting something to eat, or blah blah blah, or just to talk to truckers, because to be honest, at the time, truckers would, you get somebody on the radio and you could actually talk to them for a few minutes while they're driving their load wherever. So that was
Mhm.
another thing that you couldn't just do with a cell phone, just going like, hey, I'm talking to you, and it's just whomever you're talking to, and that's it. So yeah, it's again, being of a certain age.
Yeah. When years and years ago now, when my wife and I were first married, we drove up, took a trip up to Washington with my family, and my dad was driving one car, my uncle was driving the other car, and we were riding my dad's car. They got walkie-talkies
Hmm.
to communicate to each other on this convoy because this was still before cell phones were like as widely used as they are now, and
Mhm.
smartphones weren't a thing yet. And so they had these walkie-talkies, and immediately it was Bandit 1, Bandit 2, and going back and forth. I mean, it took 0 time for them to just drop right into it.
And
They became their 6-year-old selves again in the movie
awesome.
theater, enjoying the movie,
I
and it was
love hearing
awesome.
this. This is great. Another thing about walkie talkies at the time, because walkie talkies were kind of an open band, you'd get
Right.
bleed. So a lot of times you could just have a pair of walkie talkies and you would get CB traffic on it. So you
Mm.
could talk to somebody on a CB on certain frequencies,
Oh,
with
that's cool.
certain walkie talkies. So that was also kind of neat.
Yeah. Speaking, so looking at the you've got the two guys that are doing the bet, Big and Little Enos, and then you've got Buford and Junior there. Like there is a weird the writer of this, and we're going to talk about him in a minute because Robert, you've got some interesting things about him, but he's got some weird thing about like the dad-son relationship in this part of the country because
There's
both
some
of them,
issues.
yeah, like the sons kept calling him daddy. Like,
Well, it's the South.
I don't call
So,
my
I
dad
mean,
daddy. Yeah,
I mean, it's the South, and to be fair, wow, so many things coming up out of this. To be fair, that's not uncommon. I
okay,
mean, especially in the time, grown men would refer to their dads as daddy, and it wasn't a thing. It was just that's just what it was. I
Mhm.
mean,
yeah,
out to again late 70s, early 80s, Dallas, like Jr. Larry Hagman always referred to his father as daddy, and I think that the other boys did as well. So I mean, it was common vernacular, so it wasn't like
yeah.
that's creepy,
Right.
and it wasn't played as creepy in the movie either. So let me
No, it
also assert
wasn't.
that.
Yeah.
But it's just weird to hear in the 2020s to hear somebody just go a grown man call it going to go okay, daddy, and you're just like yeah, well what? So yeah,
I think what makes it stand out though now even more is the fact that both of the sons were just incompetent. I mean, Junior you see it a lot more than you do with Little Enos, but like Buford
I
is
don't know.
constantly,
I think Little Enos is playing the long game. I think he's
yeah.
a plotter.
you got to
Well,
get daddy's
Little
money
Enos
somehow.
is, yeah, he's got I think some other issues, some Napoleon complex going
So,
on
so I was
there.
going to say,
Very much so.
you're not going
Yes.
to mention the fact that Big Enos and Little Enos are dressed exactly alike. You're not going to mention that at all.
Well, yeah,
Like these horrendously gaudy suits,
Oh man,
and
those
you're just
yeah.
suits.
like, wow, that's a fashion choice.
Colonel Sanders is like, wow, that's a little over the top. That's a
Yeah,
little much, guys.
If Colonel Sanders is telling you it was a little over the top, you've done something wrong with your life choices. Yeah, I love when they show up and they come talking to him. I'm like, these guys are the greatest. I love Big Enos and Little Enos.
It reminded me. I can't remember his Doc Hopper almost from Muppet Movie. Just that kind of that bigger Southern gentleman in the suit that's going to come over and talk to you.
yep, yeah. And it's just and it's Pat McCormick who was all and the leads in this movie were all pretty well known
Yeah.
for something at this
Yeah,
point. I mean, you've got Burt Reynolds, who's action movie superstar at this point. You've got Sally Field, who started as a teenager in the entertainment industry. Jerry Reed, as a country musician legend.
Mm-hmm.
Jackie Gleason, going back from the
Legend.
Jackie Gleason show and the Honeymooners all the way forward.
yeah,
Pat McCormick, Paul Williams, and you're just like, so let me get this straight. You got all these people together to make a chase movie.
Right.
yeah.
Okay. And to
Well,
be honest, it's I mean, like I said, it's a movie that probably couldn't be made in any remote shape or form in the same way, but it's silly kind of fun.
Mm-hmm. Oh
it,
yeah, for
I
sure.
I think the closest thing that we have today are the Fast and the
Fast and
Furious movies,
Furious. Yeah.
I would
but they
agree.
take
That
it
would be
over
it.
the top. And
Well, I mean, let's
not that
face
this
it, this
doesn't
movie
go
took
over
it a
the
little
top,
over the top.
but
I
not,
mean, it takes it a little. It doesn't go Vin
but
Diesel over the top.
yeah,
It
it
goes
doesn't go like
Peterbilt over the
Cars in
top.
Space over the top.
Sylvester
But
Stallone over the top.
nope,
Oh,
different movie, Tracy, and we're not talking about that movie.
no,
Thank
I
no.
don't know.
I'll give you the slow clap on that one.
Thank
That
you.
was
Thank
good.
you.
You know, the only way that we would talk about over the top on this show, I would say, is if someone were to join our Patreon at the executive producer level and choose that as the movie that we would talk about for them.
Excuse
So
me a
if you
second.
have, yeah, if you have any interest in us talking about Over the Top or some other really random movie, go join our Patreon. Join at the executive producer level. It's $12 a month, and we will do the movie that you select.
Absolutely.
Because they're never going to let me pick a movie again. That's okay.
No, that's
I
not
got
true.
you, man.
That's not true. This wasn't a bad movie. That's the thing that's so funny is
Yeah.
you look at the script, you look at the story, and you think this has all the makings of being a really horrible, just poor film. The the guy who directed it, this is one of it, I think his first director
Yep.
spot,
Mhm.
and you were mentioning to us, Robert, he was a
He's a
stuntman.
stuntman. Yeah. So basically, this guy's been a stuntman in Hollywood since
John
God
Wayne.
was a boy,
Yeah.
and he's he co-writes this script. And in looking at a little bit about him, he was not just a stuntman, but he eventually became like a NASCAR owner. So he's the high action guy. And
Yeah.
you look at the script, and you're like, the car chases, some of the stunts that are done in this movie, because it was one of the first, well, one of the ones that kind of cemented car jumps in motion pictures.
Yeah.
But he's the guy who can not only he's directing it, but he's also the guy who can, like, we can do this physically, this is possible, and has the team together that can do this, because he'd been a stuntman at this point, I think, for like 20 or so years before that, and he actually used to double for Burt Reynolds and Clint Eastwood in a
Yeah.
few things. So I think that's where they met, and lo and behold, he finally gets a shot at the title, and
Hmm.
everybody's like, "You're a stuntman and you want to direct a movie," and Universal took a chance on it,
Hmm.
and the movie wound up earning. I think it did. Where was I had the budget numbers? So it had a $4.3 million budget, and it was originally, I think, only slated for like $1 million, and it just kind of kept creeping, and it
Hmm.
returned 300 million.
Woo!
Yeah.
Nice
Those are
ROI.
1970s dollars.
That's a nice
Yep.
ROI. Yeah.
It
Well,
it it
plus
had to
imagine how
be.
many cars it sold.
Exactly.
Like I'm sure when Trans
It
Am
sold.
was approached and they were like, "Yeah, we'll go ahead and do that," and then they see their sales numbers skyrocket. They're like,
Oh yeah.
I know it sold cars. I know it
"Yeah,
sold at least one because my granddad had a black Trans Am and thought that he was Burt Reynolds. He had the Burt Reynolds mustache his whole life. He wore the cowboy hat all the time. So I know
nice,
it
Oh,
sold at least one car.
that
nice."
is lovely. Thank
And
you for that.
yeah, it
That
was.
is awesome. You need to find a picture of your grandpa and put it up on our Facebook page.
I'll see if
And
I can
just really
find a good
quick,
picture of him with the
Okay,
mustache.
that's
just got
awesome.
this. So when I was saying that Coors wasn't available, it wasn't available east of Oklahoma. So
Okay,
basically,
Yeah.
West Coast was, you could have Coors, but you know,
nice.
so to have it on the east, literally on the East Coast, was like, okay.
Well, and I
So it was
think
just
this was a time. I know that there are still some dry counties and communities and things like that, but this
mhm.
was a time where that was much more prevalent. That
Yeah,
it was much harder to get the alcohol in and out, and I think that was a weird thing to experience too. Even living in Utah, I
but
thought,
yeah, because I was like, I remembered it that it was like they were smuggling alcohol. So before I rewatched it, I was thinking, okay, it's going to be like moonshine, it's going to be something like that. And then when they're like,
no, just
we
Coors.
got Coors, I'm like, what?
Well,
And that was wrong.
after
It wasn't 48 hours, because 48 hours is actually a lot more. I forgot it's 28 hours.
28 hours,
So
yeah.
28 hours is, as a benchmark. I moved to Utah from North Carolina, but let's call it another another 12 hours from Oklahoma. I'm sorry. That would have been 18 hours driving just from like Oklahoma to here.
Uh-huh.
So it's a 36-hour drive at 9 hours a day.
Ooh,
Not the world's
Yeah.
most fun drive.
yeah.
So to have to do a little better than half the country in 28 hours,
Ooh,
and load and use and do all the bio stuff you need to do,
right.
it's a little
Yeah.
tight.
You
Yeah.
got to stop for the Diablo sandwich.
Well, of course.
Well, well, that's not all they stopped for. Uh,
So,
you gotta
digging a little
stop
deep.
and stretch your legs for a walk and,
Got it.
other
Mhm.
stuff.
Yeah,
Yes,
you gotta stretching is key.
stretching is
Yeah.
key. So you dig a little leaders come up. They make the challenge. Bandit accepts it. Goes and wakes Cletus up to tell him. So we got a job, and they come up with this kind of harebrained scheme, and like, how are we going to do this, because Smokey's going to be all over us. And this is when Bandit unveils Bandit 1, which is the black T-top Trans Am.
Right.
And
Right.
it's just like, oh, so you'll be in the truck, I'll be in the band in this car, you'll be in the truck, and I'll be your blocker, and I'll scout ahead. And he did not spare any horsepower. in any location, city, town, on the highway. He's just like, oh look, I got a car that goes fast. I would love to have seen what the gas bills were like for this movie,
Oh yeah.
because with all of the driving, especially in, just punching it with this car that's a, sports car. I just would love to know what their gas
It's
budget was for this.
yeah, it's not the most fuel efficient even today, but back
Yeah.
then, can you the
No.
the accelerator goes up and the fuel gauge goes down and it's equal.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah,
And
speaking of the director though, like they strapped rockets like what Evil Knievel used to try and jump the Snake River onto the car for the bridge. And evidently he was like a key leader in getting airbags installed for not only for the movie industry, but that led to
Interesting.
airbags being installed into regular cars.
interesting. What I do have some notes on the jump that I would give the director, and I'm sure he's
Okay.
interested in my notes.
Yes.
Um, it's much more interesting if you make the jump at least a little bit difficult on screen, because when Bandit does it, he clears not just the gap between the bridge, he clears the gap and the other half of the bridge basically, and just keeps going. And I thought it would be much more interesting if he like barely hits the other side of the bridge and makes it much more believable when the police cars can't make it. Because I'm like,
You
well, they
see,
could
this is
still
this is
probably,
where you're going into Fast and the Furious territory. Because
yeah,
you've got to remember, for the time, this was the Fast and the Furious, and this
Right.
is another thing that, like, there'd been chase movies and there'd been heist movies, and you have car action scenes. We don't have things with like this kind of jump, and the way they set it up. The fact that he gets to the bridge, he's like, uh, okay, we'll go back, and they realize they can't turn around and go back, so he's like, we're just going to go for it, and especially as a 6-year-old kid in the theater, it's like, what if they don't make it?
Mm.
So this,
yeah,
so you have to have that kind of remove from what we're used to with stunts, like,
sure,
can they keep two wheels at least on the bridge, or two wheels on the ground, and maybe make the jump. But this was one of those really early, you know, I think the only other jump before this that had been that kind of daring was the 1973 Live and Let Die, where they did a
Mm.
mm,
corkscrew jump with the gremlin with the slide whistle. But, this is one of those, you've got a pretty intense moment because there are police cars right behind them. And it's a tense moment. So you're like, can they make this? And here's spoiler, they make it. And they really
yeah,
make it.
yeah,
So
Then
there's
you
that.
immediately see the police cars go right into the lake,
Yeah.
or right into the
yeah,
river.
So
Yeah.
so it makes it look like, wow, that was cool. And honestly, 6-year-old me was like, that was cool. So
Right. Right.
yeah, to be honest,
yeah.
52-year-old me still seeing the movie goes, that's kind of cool. So
Yeah.
and we've mentioned Sally Fields in the movie. So
Yes.
Bo and Cletus make it to Texarkana. They load up the truck, and now they're like, okay, we got to get back. And one of the funniest things to me is watching Jerry Reed in his truck with his Basset Hound, because his Basset Hound is his wingman, basically,
Yep.
and
Fred.
Fred. And the entire time they're doing this, he's got one of these big desktop calculators. I'm like, how the hell is he powering this thing? That's like battery, because it was one of the ones that's like at least this big, and you're just like, okay.
Yeah, it was
So
huge.
he's on his dashboard, driving with one hand, crunching numbers, trying to figure out, are we on or behind schedule? And they were oddly behind schedule a lot in this movie, but
Yeah.
they keep going, and as they're on the way back, we encounter a woman in a bride's dress in the middle of the road, which you're like, well, that's an odd thing, but okay.
Mhm. No, it's something you see every day.
Not something you see every day. And she's hitching a ride, and it's Sally Field, and she is escaping a wedding to Buford T. Justice Jr.,
Mm-hmm.
she's like, yeah, nope, which is how Sheriff Buford T. Justice winds up dogging Bandit from Texas back to
Multiple
Atlanta.
states. Yeah.
And, let's not talk about jurisdiction and reciprocity. That doesn't really play in here,
Well, this
because
is revenge.
this
This is
is no,
personal
no, no,
now.
no. It's a man on a mission.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. He's been
And
wronged.
he has been wrong. His family has been aggrieved,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yes.
you add in the whole all this chatter on the CB at this point across the country now about this run, and people are like lining up in towns that they're going through, waiting for the truck and the
Hmm.
car to go through, and they're just like got signs and they got flags, and it's the strangest thing. It's like we're having a parade for a guy who's bootlegging whiskey. I mean, beer.
Yeah.
Okay,
This was before TikTok. This was
that's
the
before
equivalent.
TikTok. Yes.
Yeah. He becomes he's a legend already in the
Right.
movie, right? And we see that play out through the CB radio and everything else. And you've got the ladies in the pink motorhome that are helping him out. You've got every trucker. I love the trucker that's helping him out. He's like, "Hey, just so you know, there's a bunch of Smokey up here, and they've got a speed stop and whatever to catch you." And he's saying this as the cop is writing a ticket for him and giving him the ticket. Like,
I mean, there's just so many incongruities with this movie. You just have to kind of go ignore.
Right.
yeah,
But again,
like the fact that Bandit 1 is clean, no matter how many dirt roads that
Yes.
car goes on.
Yep.
It's never covered in dust. It is spotless. I mean, that alone would have sold the car for me. I can go anywhere, and this car is going to stay clean.
there you go.
So
I
that
remember riding in that Trans Am. There was a lot that was cool about that car. I thought it was a
Oh,
cool car
yeah.
when I was a kid.
Oh yeah.
So
Was that woman wearing a wedding dress? She was. What's she wearing now? I'm like, wow.
So
I
to that, Sally Field gets in the car. She's in this. I mean, and it's not a small wedding dress. I mean,
No, it's not.
it's honeycomb big,
Mhm.
and she gets in the car, and then she realizes I don't want to be in this thing anymore. So she changes in the middle, like flips over the seat, changes the dress. You're just kind of like,
He's driving 120 miles an hour.
and trying not to be distracted by this. Just like there's a strange woman that just got into my car in a wedding dress, and now she's changing out of said dress. And it wasn't like must stay focused. It was like, but
there,
it also leads to getting Sally Field's handle frog because of the way she was
Yes.
jumping
yeah,
around.
Which
yep,
is a great handle.
yes. I think this movie helped two things catch on even more: CB radio and distracted driving. Because yes, you watch Burt Reynolds drive and you're like, I could do anything while I'm driving. I wonder how many teenage guys saw this movie and then later with their girlfriend tried to do the seat switching that they
Oh,
did.
uh-huh.
See if they could slide under and she could move over. Because I'm like, that's got to be pretty cool to be able to do that. I thought about wanting to try it, but it doesn't look as cool in my 8-passenger Honda Pilot and at my age. So
It's as cool as you want to make it, Jake.
Yeah. Well, and the funny thing
I
is,
don't know that I want to try to make it that cool, Robert.
he's not driving down the interstate at that point. This is the back windy roads of
It's two
Yeah.
lane, yeah.
America.
Yeah,
And that's one of the things I think was also kind of fun about this movie is they didn't just keep it to the freeways, because
Right.
if you're going to make this kind of a run, you want to stay on the freeway because you're going to have a
Yeah.
higher speed limit. Although at that point, national speed limit was 55,
Right.
and they are well above that.
I remember those days. Yeah.
double.
When it went to
And
60, it was amazing day. Yeah.
exactly, and so they're going through back roads, small towns, back country. Well, maybe not back country, but like country 2 lane roads. One
Right.
in one direction, one in the other direction, and it's the hammer is down the entire time,
Yeah,
and you're just like, this is it is a kid. You're just like, they're going fast. This is great,
Right.
and you're
yeah,
wondering why your parents don't drive this fast. And then as
yeah,
you get older, you go,
Dad.
oh, that's why.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah,
yeah.
that's not safe, among other things.
There was no safe driving in this movie
Oh
at
yeah, and
all.
seatbelts.
No.
Seatbelts are a silly
Oh,
hassle.
I
Is like
remember
the
as a kid.
catchphrase.
Yeah, we had a Datsun. We'd like put the back down and lay in the back, and there was the middle hump seat with no seat at all, let alone a seatbelt. Yeah, I totally remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So this
yeah.
movie was not exactly Consumer Safety Commission friendly.
And it's funny because those are the kinds of things that you watch a movie like this, and that's what makes it stand out compared to
Yeah.
what you watch today because it's kind of like anytime you see somebody ride a motorcycle in a movie now, they have a helmet.
Yes.
And when I was younger, that
Also Tom
wasn't the
Cruise.
case.
Well, usually too.
Yeah, well, Tom
usually
Cruise
a
is the
leather
exception, but
jacket and yeah.
yeah. And then,
Smoking.
seatbelts, like even in Fast and the Furious, I think they wear seatbelts most of the time. And it's just,
Uh-huh.
that's what you show on TV. And then smoking, you mentioned that, Robert.
Because
Yeah,
I mean,
there's
they
smoking.
smoke like chimneys in this movie.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, nonstop. I love when Sheriff Justice gets out of the car when they're catching the guys that are going to start robbing the van, take everything off the van, and he just stands there with his hand like this, and his son puts the cigarette in his hand, puts it in backwards, so he's got to flip it
And
around.
he just gives him that look, like, you idiot.
Yeah, which he
Sorry,
repeats
Daddy.
over and over in this movie. Like he is not nice to his son at all.
Yeah, his son is not the sharpest knife. I mean, little
No.
Thomas, I would say, has a couple brain cells that he can rub together and go, clue.
Yeah,
Junior,
Junior, no. Mm-mm.
he's an idiot.
Well, and I think it's interesting. I think the Trans Am is like the picture of Dorian Gray, and the opposite is the police car, because nothing happens to that Trans Am and everything happens to that police car.
very
Yeah.
interesting observation. Yeah,
So
and yeah,
That
they
went much deeper.
abused. They
That's
abused that
evident.
police car.
Yeah. It gets Tommy Boyd is basically what happens to that police car, or planes, trains, and automobile. It's a
Yeah.
I mean, how many things happen to that police car? The doors get ripped off, the roof
top
gets ripped off. It just gets
but it
beat
becomes
and
evidence,
bashed.
Robert. That's evidence.
Put the evidence in the back seat, Junior.
Daddy. Yeah,
This movie is ridiculous, Robert. It really, really is.
But in the
Everything
best
about
way.
it says that this movie is just, it should not work, but it does. And I think that's what's amazing about it. You figure the guy that wrote it and directed, this is his first go at it. He obviously knew the material, and you can tell that comes through. Everybody in the movie's bought in on what they're doing.
Yeah.
Everybody is just putting in a great performance in what they're doing. And I think that just comes through. Like they had fun making this movie, and it's fun to watch.
I think Burt Reynolds said this was the most fun he ever had on any film set.
And I mean, not only that, so I mean, you not only get good action, but you've also got, like I mentioned before, a country music legend writing songs for this movie.
Right.
And
Right.
You have Eastbound and Down and Westbound and Down, which are two sides of the same coin. And it's literally one of the funniest things about the songs are they're telling the story of the movie.
Yeah.
I mean, they're literally
Yes.
just telling you what's happening in the movie.
Right. Right.
And you're sitting there going, I'm just going to listen to it because this is great. And
It's got
I
a
am not
book.
the biggest country music fan.
Right.
Let me rephrase. I'm not the biggest modern country music fan.
Okay.
Older country and western, I can handle pretty well. And this was just upbeat and fun and silly and ridiculous enough that you're just like, okay, Eastbound and Down and Westbound and Down are two of my all-time favorite songs. Just again, the
Yeah.
nostalgia factor, but they're just
Mhm.
fun songs, and they're they're highlighting the movie. They're making fun of the cops in the movie.
Yeah.
Disclaimer:
Cops are not painted in a good light in
cops are
this
not
movie
painted in a
at
good
all.
light in this movie, and knowing some police officers, I look and go, "Oh, wow, yeah, you couldn't do that, could you? No, couldn't do anything remotely like that." So they take some latitude with the
Yeah.
law enforcement in this movie, and they poke a lot of fun at it, and Southern justice
Yeah.
as well. But I can't lie, I love the movie.
Yeah. Yeah. It is a fun movie. And I just think that's, like I said, it's surprising because there's a lot of things that could have gone very, very wrong with this movie. And I think that that's the same kind of magic that people feel when they watch some people. I have not been able to get into it. I'm sorry, but Fast and the Furious, and I know that we've compared it before,
We
but a lot of
tried.
people really, really enjoy it. And I
Wow.
think that it's that same kind of, you kind of turn the brain off and just enjoy the action and the comedy and the fun.
So that raises a question. So for the Fast and the Furious movies, is it all of them for you? Because the first two were actually played very,
Very straight.
very seriously. I mean, they took themselves seriously, and then it just became unfortunately, like the James Bond or Mission Impossible movies.
Yeah.
and the James Bond movies of the probably mid 70s to early 2000s, where it became less about James Bond and all about what gadget does he get in this movie.
Right.
So in the
Yeah.
Fast and the Furious, it becomes more of the what is the crazy stunt cars in space that we're going to see in this movie,
Yeah.
and or dragging a bank vault through Rio.
Yeah.
So
So
if we
I
don't
think for me, go ahead, Tracy.
I was going to say, if we don't have Smokey and the Bandit, we probably don't get one of the greatest road chase movies ever in Mad Max Fury Road. Right?
There's a lineage there because not only did Hal Needham direct this movie, and to get to your point, I'll get there in a second. We got Cannonball Run from this,
Right.
which is now we're taking the bootlegging aspect out and making it just a strict race movie and race and chase movie. And so I think that you're right. If we don't get Smoking the Bandit, where there's like, we could do this and then, kind of try to one up it with what can we make the most ridiculous race kind of movie
Mm-hmm.
to that. And then all of even Fast and the Furious, because you have to go through Fast and the Furious to get to Fury Road.
Right.
What can we do to make this
But
take it to the next level?
Well, and it's an out and back movie too.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of these, like the Fast and Furious, they're just going to one destination, but you're going somewhere and then you're retracing your steps and coming all the way back.
Yeah, first go away, then come back. Yeah, and so there's that progression that you get from Smoking the Bandit all the way through, and I know that there was a lot of ridicule early on when they were talking about we're going to make a movie about this guy who goes and bootlegs beer across the country, and for Needham to come back and make a movie that not only captured the public's imagination because of the action, the chases, and riding on the popularity of 70s CB culture,
Mm-hmm.
and just went, I'm going to shove all these together and make a movie. And like Jake was saying, it sounds like at face value, you're just like,
No.
there's no way. And I'm actually kind of curious about who at Universal was the final guy who said, okay, here we go. Because I'm sure that he caught flack up until they started seeing dollar signs. It's like, oh, people are seeing this movie a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Before we give grades, Jake, I found this and I thought this was interesting. So Needham came up with the idea for the film after he learned that transporting Coors beer east of the Mississippi was a bootlegging crime. A 1974 article in Time, 3 years before the movie, explained why Coors was so sought after and that why people would pay such a high price for it is it had a lack of stabilizers and preservatives. The lack of additives and preservatives meant that Coors had the potential for spoiling in a week if not kept cold throughout its transportation and storage at its destination. This explains the 28-hour deadline.
Oh.
So there you go.
Interesting. So they did research for this movie. Okay.
That was all the research they did for that movie.
Well, but listen, that's another bet I would have lost.
Well, here's another little tidbit. Buford T. Justice was the name of an actual cop in Florida that Burt Reynolds' father knew. So
because that is one of the greatest names ever.
So yeah,
I just thought it was lazy writing. Like, what should we call this sheriff from the south? Let's call him Buford. Buford what? Justice. Let's go with Justice. Yeah.
Let's take it up a notch and give him a middle initial.
Yeah.
But I just think, I kind of wish I had a time machine just so I could go back and hang out on this set. Because, you've got Gidget, you've got, just all these people. It reminds me, I was watching it last night and I was reminded how good the Saturday Night Live impression on Celebrity Jeopardy was of
Norm Macdonald doing Burt Reynolds.
Yeah, Norm. I couldn't think of his name, but his impression. I was watching that again, watching the movie last night, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that impression is so good.
I thought you were just watching Celebrity Jeopardy on Saturday Night Live again. Like every once in a while, Tracy just puts up the playlist from YouTube of all the old Celebrity Jeopardy episodes.
The YouTube rabbit holes I'll go down. You don't even want to know.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I think we've all been there. What are you watching? I don't even know anymore. I don't know how I got here. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm here now. Yeah, and I just know I have to keep going.
Yeah.
The only way to the end is through.
The only way
Yep,
out
exactly.
is through.
I can't stop now.
Yeah.
Well, let's give this movie a grade. But before we do, we just want to remind you to please go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and then share this movie if you like it. Comment below with your favorite car chase movie, because that's what this is a big, big car chase, fun movie. I think this is the type of movie that can only be made in America for American audiences because we've all done the road trip thing. And I don't know, in a lot of other parts of the world, that is not as common. I mean, Europe is like the size of the United States, so you don't do a road trip like you do.
Across Europe.
It's
Yeah.
just different. It's just
You also do
different.
it by
And I
train
think,
there, because trains go everywhere, so you don't have to take
yeah,
your car.
Yeah.
You know,
And
you
you
want
back
to
right,
go someplace, you hop on a train, and you
yeah,
forget everything else and just, oh, magically we're here.
yeah. Which in and of itself is amazing, but it's just a very different experience than
Yeah.
the road trip that we do so often here in the United States, and it's just fun. For me, this movie was a B. It doesn't have the same nostalgia factor, I think, but I still really enjoyed it. It was still really, really funny, and you can tell that it was just a lot of love went into making the movie, and that people were having a good time. And when that comes through on film, I think that it makes for an entertaining movie, even if the premise and everything just seems ridiculous. That's all right. Sometimes you just got to go for it.
And this is not the silliest movie we've reviewed. We reviewed Clifford. So
Yes, that is true. This is not as silly as Clifford.
I'm glad that Robert picked that one up, because not a lot of people, when you say Clifford, they think of the big red dog. They don't think of Martin Short. So
Wow.
yeah.
That's all I got there.
I
Is just
can't.
wow.
Yeah, I'm with you, Jake. I grew up more on the Cannonball Run. I'm a few years younger than Robert, not by much, but just a few. I remember seeing it. I remember my dad enjoying it. But I remember Cannonball Run and the Clint Eastwood, The Right Turn, Clyde. The monkey.
Yes.
Anyway,
Any
those
which
were,
way but loose.
yes. Any which way but loose. Yeah. So this one didn't quite have the nostalgia factor, but I'm still going to give it a B. It's a lot of fun. It's one of those movies where we talk about sometimes where it is a snapshot of a time. Like, it's not a timeless picture. This is definitely set within a certain time,
Mhm.
but man, it's just a lot of fun. Burt Reynolds is great. Sally Field, Jackie Gleason. It's a stat cast, and just it's fun.
So I'm going to agree with you. It is definitely a B movie, a B grade movie. But because I do have that nostalgia factor, it bumps up to A minus for me, just
Cool.
because there's a lot of emotional
Mm-hmm.
impact and content that, like I said, I saw this movie 3 times in the theater, and my father sat through it 3 times in the theater with me. Um, but it is. I think that your statement that it's a snapshot of a certain time in America is spot on, and it's it's not it's not an unflattering look at that time,
Right.
because it could very easily have gone. Some of the characters do go a little into caricature, but this
Mhm.
entire movie could have gone into caricature, and they did a
Definitely.
good job. And like you said, Needham put a lot of love into this, because it was something that, as a first time director, you don't want to be like, well, they gave me the shot, I don't want to never have this opportunity again.
Right.
And I think that because of that, we get a quality of movie that is highly unexpected for what this is. What are you doing? We're driving across the country and back. That's National Lampoon's Vacation,
Mm-hmm.
which is
Mhm.
an entirely different road trip kind of movie,
Right.
a different feel. But this one, they were like, we want to we want to play fast and loose with the rules a bit on this one, but we want to keep it honestly kind of grounded. And they did, except for the car jump scene, or the car under truck scene, or
On
we're going to slide a truck out of a convoy to put a car in the middle of 2 trucks, and then move the truck kind of back into the convoy, but not quite, so that you can't see the car in the convoy. The suspension of disbelief for some of the things in this movie, little on the high side.
I expected the car to, like, him to take an off exit and then
No,
be like, oh
yeah,
crap.
because
Yeah.
apparently police cars don't have rear view mirrors.
Yeah. That was my thought. As they pulled up, I'm like, now they should be able to see him just by looking in the mirror, but they didn't check their mirrors at all.
Why would you? And why would
Well,
you even look at this?
when
Why
you're
is this
looking
truck
for somebody,
sticking out?
It's the
Well-
Clark Kent. You put on those glasses, and all of a sudden, it's not
Yeah.
Superman
they
anymore.
they were just looking straight ahead.
Keep your eyes on the road.
That's some
I
good police
give it
work there.
I give it a good B, a good solid B with a couple of bonus points for nostalgia.
We have often done that on this show where we're like, myself now would give it this rate, but because I remember seeing it as a kid, then it's got to go up to here. Yeah.
Yeah, there
And-
have been a couple of A's that I've given out that I'm like, screw it, it's an A. I don't. I get everything that's wrong with the movie. I don't care.
Yeah, and there are movies that I totally get that with, and this, like I said, it's problematic in socially it couldn't be made in today's climate
Yeah.
without protests on one side or the other, if not both, to be honest.
Yeah.
But
Well, and I think this is such kind of like a love letter to the South at that time, and it's kind of like a little gentle poke. Like, we can laugh at this together.
Yeah.
Whereas it seems like now a lot of the humor is much sharper and much harsher.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So yeah, there you go.
Well, there you go. There is Smokey and the Bandit. Robert, thank you for selecting this film. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for allowing me to inflict this movie upon you.
No, I
That's a
don't
deal.
feel inflicted at all. We will be back next week. Val is still going to be gone, but we'll have special guest James Owen, who has been on the show before with us. We talked about A Knight's Tale with him. This time we're talking about Thomas Crown Affair. So be back for that. And then later this week, we will be releasing our Patreon exclusive episode of Dungeons and Dragons. We got to go see that. Robert will be back for that one. Thank you, Robert, for joining us on that one as well.
Thank you for having me.
And we are excited to talk about that and share that with you. It comes out on March 31st, so you'll definitely want to check that out in the theaters. But thank you for being here. Thank you for listening and watching. We appreciate your support. And until next time, we won't see you at the movies.
Breaker. That's a good 10-4.
This has been an Age of Geek media production.